Deep beneath the green canopy of Central America, an ancient world still sleeps in stone. For centuries, the forest concealed the remains of one of the most brilliant civilizations in human history. This is the lost world of the Maya, a world of kings, astronomers, builders, and cities swallowed by time. Even in silence, these stones still speak of rulers, rituals, memory, and time. But these were never empty stones. They once stood at the heart of living cities, filled with movement, belief, and ambition. Tonight, we begin a quiet journey into one of the most fascinating civilizations the world has ever known. Welcome to Lantern History. If you enjoy calm journeys into the past, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And before we begin, please subscribe, enjoy the documentary, and tell me in the comments which country and city you are watching from tonight. Now, let us step beyond the maps and into the forest, where the story of the Maya still waits beneath the trees. What once seemed like scattered ruins would eventually reveal itself as something far greater, a vast network of cities hidden in plain sight. The Maya world was not a single city, but a wide and intricate landscape of kingdoms, roads, forests, and sacred places. From humid lowlands to distant highlands, Maya life unfolded across rivers, hills, wetlands, and forests. Their world was not ruled by one empire, but by many powerful city-states, each with its own rulers, alliances, and ambitions. Their cities were built not only for shelter, but for ceremony, memory, power, and the movement of the heavens. The Maya recorded names, dates, victories, rituals, and royal lineages in one of the most sophisticated writing systems of the ancient world. To read these signs is to hear ancient voices, not as legend, but as history carefully placed into stone. The Maya watched the sky with extraordinary patience, measuring cycles of the sun, moon, planets, and seasons. Time was not abstract here. It moved through shadows, horizons, ceremonies, and carefully remembered patterns in the sky.
Behind every temple stood generations of labor. Stonecutters, plaster workers, carriers, planners, and builders.
What we now see as pale ruins were once bright, finished surfaces, painted, maintained, and alive with meaning. At dawn, the city was not a ruin or a mystery. It was a living place of work, trade, family, and devotion. Beyond the temples, Maya civilization was sustained by ordinary rhythms: maize, water, craft, family, and the labor of each day. Goods moved through these cities by hand, by memory, and by networks that tied distant communities together. Long causeways connected places across the landscape, turning the forest into a world of movement, exchange, and political reach. In a land where seasons could be generous or unforgiving, water was gathered, guarded, and engineered into the heart of the city. A Maya city was more than its temples. It was a system of water, food, movement, labor, ceremony, and authority. Over time, the forest covered these systems so thoroughly that even great cities seemed to vanish beneath the leaves. To understand what lay below, archaeologists needed a way to see through the forest without destroying it. LiDAR sends pulses of light toward the earth, measuring the shapes hidden beneath the canopy. And when the forest was digitally lifted away, the shape of an ancient civilization began to appear. The first surprise was not a single ruin. It was the pattern of an entire landscape. To trained eyes, the bare earth became a document, one written in ridges, platforms, depressions, and lines. Again and again, the same question appeared. Why did the forest floor contain so many human-made shapes? Across the Maya lowlands, LiDAR helped reveal more than 60,000 hidden traces of ancient construction. The lines were not random. Many were causeways, raised roads connecting people, plazas, markets, and power. These roads carried more than footsteps. They carried tribute, news, ritual processions, and political influence. The city did not end at the temple. It continued into terraces, fields, managed forests, and carefully worked soil. Water was not simply found. It was collected, stored, protected, and built into the design of the city. What once seemed like a ceremonial center began to look like a much wider urban world. The Maya landscape was not a scattering of isolated ruins. It was a connected world of cities, roots, and rival powers. But every digital discovery still had to meet the ground, the stone, and the patient work of archaeology. In the forest, a single straight line could change the meaning of an entire hill. What looked like a natural rise could be a stairway, a platform, or the buried face of a temple.
When the shape on the map matched the shape under the roots, the hidden city became harder to dismiss.
The old picture of isolated ceremonial centers was no longer enough to explain what lay beneath the trees. Many of the hidden shapes were not palaces or temples, but homes, places where daily life held the civilization together. Other forms suggested elite compounds, where authority was performed through architecture, ceremony, and controlled access. Some lines were not roads at all. They were walls, ditches, and defenses, evidence that conflict shaped the landscape too. The Maya world was built from devotion and labor, but also from rivalry, strategy, and the reach of kings. And in places like Holmul, the hidden landscape would lead archaeologists from maps into tunnels, chambers, and carved stories in stone.
At Holmul, the hidden landscape led not to an open plaza, but into the earth itself.
Every step inside a tunnel like this must be slow, because the past here is delicate.
In the darkness, archaeology becomes a conversation with silence, pressure, and time.
Then, beneath the earth, a surface appeared that was not natural stone, but ancient plaster shaped by human hands.
What first looked like a wall soon became something far more extraordinary. Hidden in the chamber was a great stucco frieze, a carved story preserved in darkness. The faces on the wall did not simply decorate the chamber. They carried royal memory, ritual meaning, and political identity. Even after centuries, traces of color remained, reminding us that Maya monuments were once vivid, painted, and alive with meaning. Behind such images were scribes and artists who understood that power had to be remembered, shaped, and seen. A frieze like this was not only art, it was a public statement about rulers, ancestors, gods, and legitimacy. Maya writing could anchor a ruler in time, placing a name, a lineage, and an event into the memory of the city. Holmul did not stand alone. Its monuments pointed toward wider alliances and rivalries that stretched across the Maya world. Below temples and monuments, offerings connected the living city to ancestors, sacred forces, and political memory.
In places like this, the dead were not simply buried. They were placed within the architecture of memory.
Objects placed in darkness could reveal networks of value, belief, and status that reached far beyond one city.
For the Maya, the living city was bound down to those who came before. Through ritual, architecture, and remembrance.
To archaeologists, the frieze was a document, one that could reshape the story of Holmul's place in Maya politics. A discovery inside one chamber could point outward, toward kingdoms, alliances, and rival powers across the lowlands. Holmul was one piece of a broader landscape where cities watched one another, traded, competed, and remembered. But to understand how this world began, we must look even deeper, toward earlier centers where ritual and power first took shape. Long before the tallest temples rose above the forest, earlier centers were already shaping ritual, memory, and power.
At places like Cival, archaeologists found clues to a much older ceremonial order beneath the later Maya world.
The plaza was not empty space. It was a stage where people, architecture, and the sky could meet. Before writing filled monuments with names, ritual specialists helped give order to community, landscape, and time. Small acts, repeated across generations, could bind a place to sacred meaning. Here, the rising sun could turn architecture into a calendar, and a plaza into a place of cosmic order. Archaeologists call arrangements like this E-groups, spaces where ritual, architecture, and celestial observation came together. From the western side, the horizon could be read carefully, season after season, generation after generation. Such places were not only for specialists. They gathered communities into shared time, shared memory, and shared identity. Offerings placed below the surface could make the ground itself part of a living sacred record. What survives as an archaeological cache may once have been a moment of devotion, obligation, and hope. Over time, the ability to organize ritual could become the ability to organize people, labor, and political life. These early centers were built by many hands, turning earth and stone into places where society could gather. Monuments did not appear all at once. They accumulated through repeated effort, renewal, and communal memory. Sacred power could be made visible on the face of architecture, where symbols watched over the plaza. Before dynastic courts filled the landscape, places like this helped create the foundations of Maya political imagination. To study an early center is to read layers, each one a trace of rebuilding, ceremony, and changing authority.
One mound could contain many earlier versions of itself, each buried beneath the next act of rebuilding.
From these layers, archaeologists began to see the first shapes of power before the great Maya kingdoms. From early sacred centers, the Maya world moved toward a new era, one of dynasties, carved histories, and competing kingdoms. By the Classic period, many Maya cities had become royal centers, ruled by dynasties that placed power into stone, ceremony, and memory. At the center of each kingdom stood the Ajau, the royal lord whose authority was performed through ritual, ancestry, and public display. Stele turned the plaza into a public record, where rulers could present their names, ceremonies, victories, and ancestry. Every royal statement required skilled hands, carvers who transformed political memory into durable stone. Dates mattered because they placed royal actions inside sacred cycles, linking human events to a larger order of time.
Royal courts were not made of kings alone. Noble women shaped alliances, rituals, households, and the continuity of dynastic power.
Palaces organized power through space, deciding who could approach, who could witness, and who could be remembered. Authority had to be seen. Public ceremony made rulership visible to the city and meaningful within the sacred order. The Maya world was a world of city-states, where neighboring courts could be allies, rivals, patrons, or enemies. Emblem glyphs marked political identity, tying rulers to particular places, dynasties, and claims of authority. Among the most powerful forces in this world was the Kanul, or Snake, dynasty, whose influence reached across many courts. From great centers such as Kalakmul, royal influence could move through marriage, warfare, patronage, and ritual obligation. And at Tikal, another great court stood, within the same competitive landscape, watching, recording, and responding. Alliances were not abstract. They moved through marriages, gifts, obligations, and the bodies of noble families. Tribute helped turn political relationships into material reality, bringing distant resources into royal centers. Royal action gained power when it was placed on the right day, inside a calendar that joined politics to the heavens. Some histories were painted, folded, carried, consulted, and revised within the living routines of the court. Sometimes history speaks through what is written. Sometimes it speaks through pauses, damage, and the absence of a record.
Between powerful courts, politics could shift slowly, through alliance, intimidation, ritual display, and the memory of earlier victories.
Yet royal power depended on more than ceremony. It depended on cities large enough to feed, move, store, and organize thousands of lives. The monument was only the beginning. Around it stretched a city of homes, roads, waterworks, fields, and daily labor.
At great centers like Tikal, temples rose high above the canopy, turning the city into a landscape of stone and sky.
The plaza gathered the city together, serving ceremony, politics, exchange, movement, and memory all at once.
Cities depended not only on rulers and priests, but on people who carried food, goods, messages, and the weight of daily life. Raised causeways helped bind city centers to neighborhoods, fields, reservoirs, and other places of power.
Beyond the royal core, neighborhoods formed the true body of the city, where families worked, cooked, stored, repaired, and remembered. Urban life was sustained by small, repeated acts: grinding, weaving, carrying, storing, cooking, and caring. The city grew because labor could be organized, stone by stone, basket by basket, surface by surface. What appears today as pale stone was once coated, repaired, painted, and renewed by human hands. Water shaped the city as surely as stone did, because survival depended on storing the rain before the dry season came. Channels, plastered surfaces, and catchments helped guide precious water into places where the city could hold it. Each dry season reminded the city that abundance was temporary, and that stored water was a form of power.
A large city required a surrounding world of fields, gardens, managed forests, and constant movement of food.
The forest was not simply outside the city. It could be managed, used, protected, and woven into urban survival. Planning was visible in storage, because cities had to think beyond a single day, a single harvest, or a single season.
Markets and exchange helped move materials through the city, linking households to courts and local life to distant routes.
Some materials, like obsidian, traveled from distant sources, carrying geography into the heart of the city. Seen from above, the city became a living rhythm of water, labor, ceremony, exchange, and movement. What people once walked, built, stored, and repaired became the hidden infrastructure that LiDAR would one day reveal. Yet the greater the city became, the more it depended on systems that could be strained by rivalry, drought, and war. Beyond the reservoirs and roads, the landscape carried another kind of evidence: lines built to control, protect, and resist. Defense began with watching paths, borders, roads, and the spaces where rivals might appear. Some defenses were made of earth, stone, and timber, turning ordinary terrain into controlled passages. At fortified places like La Cuernavilla, archaeology revealed that warfare could shape entire hillsides and approaches. To hold a hill was to control visibility, movement, and the fragile distance between safety and danger. Defensive spaces did not need to stop every movement. Sometimes they only needed to narrow it, slow it, and make it visible. Roads connected cities, but connection also created vulnerability, because every path could carry goods, news, or threat. War left traces not only in ruins, but in objects prepared quietly before danger ever arrived. Defenses also had to be maintained, repaired, and reinforced by the same labor systems that built temples and reservoirs. A defended place needed more than walls. It needed food, water, storage, and people able to endure uncertainty. For rulers, war was not only fought at borders. It entered palaces as calculation, obligation, and fear of losing face.
Victories, defeats, captures, and alliances entered history through the hands of scribes who served royal memory. War could be carved into public memory, but stone usually preserved the ruler's version of events. Sometimes the evidence of conflict was not a battle scene, but a warning carried by smoke on the horizon. When roads became dangerous, the city felt it in markets, households, ceremonies, and stored food. LiDAR made some defensive systems visible again, showing that conflict was not occasional noise, but part of the landscape. Conflict was not separate from urban life. It touched roads, fields, water, alliances, and the authority of kings. The story was rarely one battle alone. It was a long pressure moving through rulers, workers, travelers, and families.
A complex city could endure pressure for a time, but each strain made the next one harder to absorb. To understand how Maya cities endured, we must look not only at war, but at the fragile systems that kept people alive. Behind every wall, life still had to continue. In courtyards, kitchens, storage rooms, markets, and fields.
Porters like Yakshun carried more than goods. They carried the daily circulation that kept the city alive.
Before goods reached markets or rulers, survival began with maize, stone, water, and patient hands.
A Maya household was also an economy, where food, cloth, storage, repair, and memory were managed every day.
Elite households managed wealth in visible forms: cloth, food, vessels, ornaments, and obligations owed by others. When movement returned to the plaza, exchange returned with it, restoring one of the city's quiet rhythms. Cacao could carry value, flavor, status, and connection, moving between households, courts, and distant communities. Obsidian connected the city to distant stone sources, carrying faraway landscapes into everyday tools and elite exchange. Precious materials could speak of distance, rank, alliance, and the invisible routes that joined one court to another. Other goods carried the memory of water and coastlines, reminding us that inland cities were tied to worlds beyond the forest.
Textiles held labor in their fibers, becoming useful goods, household wealth, tribute, and signs of status.
Clay vessels made daily life possible, holding water, food, offerings, and the careful planning of households. The same knowledge that shaped monuments also repaired tools, platforms, walls, and the quiet materials of daily survival. Economy and writing met in the court, where goods, obligations, and political relationships could be recorded. Feasting could turn food into politics, making generosity, rank, alliance, and obligation visible to others. What appeared as wealth in the palace could also be felt as labor in the bodies of those who carried it. Networks were not only lines on a map, they were walked, carried, remembered, and paid for through human effort. Surplus gave a city resilience, but it also revealed a truth. Every system depended on seasons arriving as expected. The economy was a living web of households, roads, resources, records, obligations, and seasonal trust. All of this, trade, storage, labor, ceremony, and power, waited each year for the return of rain. In the Maya lowlands, water could seem peaceful, but every still surface carried the memory of a season that might not return on time. People could store water and plan carefully, but they could not command the clouds. When the rains came, they did more than cool the stone. They renewed the promise that the city could continue. Across the lowlands, rain connected forest, field, roof, plaza, reservoir, and household. To catch rain was to catch the sky itself, guiding a brief season into storage for the months ahead. When water filled the steps again, survival became visible in the simplest act of filling a vessel. Observers of the sky watched not only stars and calendars, but the rhythm of seasons on which the city depended. Calendars helped communities remember cycles, But memory could not remove the risk of a season becoming uncertain.
A falling waterline was not an abstract problem. It changed how far people walked, how much they carried, and how long supplies might last.
When rain became irregular, the pressure moved quickly from sky to field, from field to household, and from household to city. In households of every rank, people had to measure what remained, deciding how much could be used and how much must be saved. Ritual did not guarantee rain, but it gave uncertainty a shape that people could gather around. Images of rain, fertility, and sacred water reminded the city that survival depended on forces beyond human hands. To understand ancient drought, researchers also look beyond cities, into caves, where water leaves long memories in stone.
Layer by layer, mineral growth can preserve clues about rainfall, dryness, and changing seasons across centuries.
Lake mud can also become an archive, holding traces of erosion, dryness, vegetation, and human activity.
None of these signs speaks alone. Together, they suggest patterns of water, stress, and changing seasonal reliability. A single dry year could be endured, but repeated dry years could turn planning into hardship, and hardship into crisis.
But drought alone does not explain everything. It mattered because it met cities already shaped by war, rivalry, labor, and political expectation.
When water, food, trade, war, and royal authority were strained together, the city became more vulnerable than any single cause could explain.
When systems are connected, pressure does not stay in one place. It travels through water, food, roads, markets, walls, and royal power.
A king could claim sacred authority, but even the most powerful court could not force rain from an empty sky. Ceremony could give people a way to face uncertainty, but it could not remove the material problem of falling water. When roads became risky and supplies uncertain, the market could grow quiet before the temples ever fell silent. In times of stress, tribute could feel less like loyalty and more like a burden carried upward toward the court. When fields struggled, the problem did not remain outside the city. It entered storage rooms, markets, kitchens, and palaces. In a world of rival courts, even a message could travel through fear, suspicion, and guarded roads. When danger grew, people could move inward, concentrating life behind walls that were never meant to carry every burden forever. Collapse, when it came, was also made of small decisions: what to save, what to carry, whom to feed, and when to leave. Some histories were carved with confidence. Others were interrupted, left unfinished, or never recorded at all. A palace could separate rulers from the crowd, but it could not fully separate power from the condition of the city below. To speak of a city is to speak of many households, each trying to carry uncertainty through one more evening. Leaving did not always mean panic. Sometimes it may have begun as a careful decision made at the doorway of a home. The decline of a city was rarely one night of silence. More often, it was a sequence of departures, returns, repairs, and final decisions. Temples did not need to fall for a city to change. Sometimes the first great silence was simply the absence of people below them. After people moved away, the forest did not erase the city at once. It returned slowly, root by root, season by season. But even after centuries of growth, the shape of the city remained beneath the leaves, waiting to be seen again. The people did not simply vanish. Many moved, adapted, joined other communities, and carried memory into new places. Even as some royal centers declined, Maya life continued in smaller rhythms, different places, and changing political worlds.
Collapse is too small a word for what happened here. It was decline, movement, adaptation, memory, and transformation at once.
As pressure grew, the public memory of kings could also become fragile, weathered, interrupted, or left unfinished. A missing date can matter as much as a carved one, because silence in the record can mark a change in power. A palace could stand almost unchanged, while the authority that once filled it began to fade. Maintenance is one of the quietest signs of stability. When repairs become harder to sustain, a city begins to show its strain. Water systems depended on constant care. A blocked channel could turn engineering into vulnerability. A road exists through use. When fewer feet cross it, connection begins to weaken before the stone disappears. Defenses built for danger could become reminders of another problem. Fewer people moving through the spaces they were meant to protect. At moments of strain, power became a question of choices. What to preserve, what to abandon, and how long to wait. For many people, history may have turned not in monuments, but in the careful packing of a bundle. What people carried was not only food or tools. They carried language, memory, ritual knowledge, and the habits of home. Leaving one center did not mean leaving the Maya world. It could mean joining another community, another rhythm, another future. An empty plaza is not the same as an erased world. It is a place where human rhythms have changed. Some departures may have been marked by offerings, small gestures that made leaving part of memory rather than only loss. Centuries later, archaeology finds these changes in floors, hearths, paths, broken vessels, and the traces of ordinary rooms. Grand histories often depend on small traces: charcoal, seeds, soil, and the remains of meals and fires.
A broken vessel can mark use, repair, abandonment, or return. Even fragments resist simple answers.
The evidence does not ask us to imagine one final apocalypse. It asks us to understand many changes happening at once.
Not every city followed the same path. Some declined sharply, some changed more slowly, and others remained connected to new centers of life.
The story did not end with the silence of old royal courts. Maya communities continued to live, adapt, remember, and rebuild. To follow the Maya story honestly, we must leave the idea of disappearance behind and turn toward living memory. After the great courts changed, Maya life did not end. It continued in homes, fields, languages, ceremonies, and memory. Language carries more than words. It carries ways of naming land, family, work, weather, and the past. Some forms of knowledge survive because they are repeated by hand, day after day, generation after generation. In woven cloth, memory can become pattern, held in color, rhythm, skill, and the patience of making. Clay has always held more than water or food. It holds touch, use, repair, and the quiet shape of everyday life. Some histories are not carved into stone. They are told softly, remembered carefully, and carried in families. Ancient glyphs preserve some names. Living communities preserve others in speech, work, places, and relationships. The forest is not only a place that covered ancient cities. It is also a living landscape of knowledge, food, paths, and memory. Modern archaeology must approach these places not as empty ruins, but as landscapes connected to people, ancestors, and living communities. The most careful questions are asked not only with instruments, but with humility toward those whose heritage is still alive. A map can show shape and distance, but memory can hold names, paths, meanings, and caution. Technology can reveal hidden forms, but respect determines those revelations are handled. LiDAR can lift the canopy digitally, but the forest itself remains living, protected, and full of present meaning. Ancient stone is not treasure waiting to be claimed. It is heritage, evidence, and memory that demands care. Some places are best understood not as abandoned ruins, but as open-air archives where many responsibilities meet. The same sky that guided ancient calendars still rises above living communities, homes, stories, and questions. Across centuries, observation became memory, and memory became one way of belonging to the world. Not every record survives as writing, but the impulse to remember can move through signs, patterns, stories, and practice.
Hands that build and repair are also historians, preserving knowledge in motion, pressure, balance, and touch.
The past is not simply buried beneath the forest. It lives in the questions we ask, the care we take, and the people who continue the story. In this landscape, the past is not behind us. It is beneath the path, beside the home, and within the questions we ask. Every discovery begins with a question, but the best questions are careful about the people and places they touch.
LiDAR can show shape, height, and pattern. It cannot, by itself, tell us what a place meant to the people who lived there.
Remote sensing may guide the eye, but archaeology still returns to soil, stone, patience, and careful confirmation. At Holmul, the wall did not reveal a lost fantasy. It revealed a political memory preserved by darkness. At Cival, older sacred spaces remind us that Maya political life grew from deep roots of ceremony, gathering, and time. At great centers like Tikal, LiDAR helped shift the story from isolated monuments to vast urban systems. A causeway is not only a line in the data, it is the trace of countless journeys made by human feet. Water linked engineering to ritual, household to city, and the rhythm of rain to the fragile order of power. Warfare was not only a moment of violence, it reshaped roads, borders, labor, memory, and the confidence of rulers. Drought mattered deeply, but it did not act alone. It met political rivalry, labor demands, war, and fragile food systems. Large explanations become more honest when we remember that they were lived by people, households, workers, travelers, and families.
The word lost can be useful for mystery, but it can also hide a truth. The Maya world was never simply gone.
What was never lost was language, craft, food knowledge, family memory, and the ability to adapt. To read stone well, we must admit both what it reveals and what it cannot say alone. Maps can be taught as lines and distances, but they can also be taught as belonging, memory, and responsibility. A city can be drawn without words. A road, a home, a water place, a gathering space, and a memory of those before. Back at the map, the story feels different now. The lines no longer mark only ruins, but lives, choices, and continuities. A map can guide a journey, but it cannot contain the full weight of a civilization or the living memory of its people. Now, before our journey ends, we return once more to the forest, not to find a lost world, but to understand a continuing one. The forest does not hold one story. It holds layers of building, leaving, remembering, and living. Technology lets us see beneath the green surface, but the landscape remains alive, complex, and unfinished.
What returns is not a fantasy of treasure, but a city made of water, work, roads, households, and memory.
No single person made the city. Its life came through authority, writing, building, observation, carrying, water, roads, and memory. Holmul reminds us that a wall can preserve politics, belief, artistry, and the need to be remembered. Cival reminds us that power did not begin with tall temples alone, but with gathering, ritual, horizon, and shared time. Tikal reminds us that the most famous monuments were only the visible peaks of much larger urban systems.
Water reminds us that survival was built every year, stored in stone, carried in vessels, and trusted to the sky. Roads remind us that connection was walked into being. One journey, one load, and one message at a time. Walls remind us that cities were also vulnerable, shaped by rivalry, fear, protection, and the cost of conflict. Fields remind us that monumentality depended on harvests, soil, labor, and seasons that could never be fully controlled. Markets remind us that value moved through trust, obligation, distance, skill, and the hands that carried goods. Writing reminds us that history is both what was recorded and what time, politics, and loss left unsaid. Ceremony reminds us that people do not live by systems alone. They live by meaning, hope, fear, and belonging. Departure reminds us that decline was not disappearance. It was movement, choice, survival, and transformation. Living memory reminds us that Maya history continues in communities, languages, crafts, foods, and responsibilities. Understanding the past becomes more careful when research walks beside living knowledge, rather than ahead of it. Evidence can be large as a city or small as a seed. Each scale changes what we think we know. The question is no longer, where did they go? It is, how did people build, endure, change, and continue? The Maya world is not simply lost. It is still speaking in stone, soil, forest, language, memory, and living hands. The forest answers slowly, not with one discovery, but with many traces that change how we listen. What once seemed empty was full of roads, homes, waterworks, walls, and memory. To see only ruins is to miss the homes, hands, languages, and living rhythms that still continue. Civilization is not only monument and king. It is water, food, work, memory, care, and the daily making of a world.
Stone gives one kind of story. Soil gives another. Together, they ask for patience.
Mystery can invite us closer, but it should never turn living heritage into a puzzle for outsiders alone. There is no treasure ending here. The real discovery is a more careful way of seeing. Silence is not absence. It is the place where careful questions begin. And so we return to the lamp, to the map, and to the quiet room where the journey began. On the desk, the evidence becomes simple again. A line, a mound, a vessel, a name, a question. A good notebook does not close every question. It teaches us which questions deserve more care. A compass points direction, but a road remembers movement, burden, return, and departure. A wall in darkness taught us that memory can survive in the most hidden places.
A vessel on a table can remind us of a reservoir, and a reservoir can remind us of an entire city's trust in rain. Every line on the map was once a place where feet met stone and choices moved through the forest. The past is easiest to misunderstand when we forget the household, the meal, the cloth, and the ordinary morning.
And beyond the map are living voices. Voices that no old chart can replace. The journey returns to the room, but the story does not stay there. Before we close the book, we should remember that history is not finished simply because a chapter grows quiet. The Maya story continues beyond the frame, in the forest, in the archive, and in the lives of people still carrying it forward. After such a journey, the room feels quieter, but the map feels larger than before. The word lost can make a story feel mysterious, but it can also hide people, continuity, and living memory. The canopy was not empty. Beneath it were roads, homes, water systems, fields, and entire urban worlds. The answer was never one cause, one battle, one drought, or one abandoned temple. A Maya city was a web, and every web becomes fragile when too many threads are pulled at once. Kings carved their names into stone, but households carried civilization through work no monument could fully record. Water was stored in reservoirs, carried in vessels, measured in seasons, and trusted to clouds that might delay. Roads carried tribute and trade, but they also carried decisions to leave, return, or begin again elsewhere. Walls tell us that connection carried risk, and that powerful cities were also places of anxiety. Silence in one plaza did not mean silence everywhere. Life continued in other places, other forms, and other rhythms.
The living thread of Maya history is carried in language, craft, food, family, memory, and responsibility.
To end responsibly is to remember that these places are not empty stages, but parts of living heritage. The notebook remains open, because history is not a door we close behind us. Thank you for joining this quiet journey through forest, stone, memory, and time. This story belongs not only to the past, but to those who continue to live with its memory. Stone remains, but it does not speak alone. It needs context, care, and listening. Water remains in the story, as need, design, prayer, and warning.
A path is more than a route. It is a way that memory keeps moving. The same sky watched over temples, homes, departures, returns, and all the questions that remain. For now, the lantern stays lit, and the map remains open. The lantern stays lit because some histories ask us to look again, more gently than before. The forest itself became a page, not blank, but written in roots, shadows, stone, and distance. Beneath the ink, the city returns, not as legend, but as pattern, evidence, and human design. The margins of history are full of people whose names may be gone, but whose work shaped everything. So the old phrase, "lost world," must be handled carefully. Much was hidden, but the people were never simply gone. Hidden is not the same as gone. Silent is not the same as empty. Land, water, food, road, stone, cloth, and memory, each one held part of the answer. The question becomes kinder when it stops asking why a people vanished and begins asking how they endured change. Sometimes the smallest traces carry the most human questions. What was cooked? What was carried? What was left behind? And sometimes the land itself becomes the archive, holding the shape of a civilization beneath the trees. No ending is honest if it leaves out the living people who continue to carry Maya memory forward. Sometimes the final act of research is not taking one more note, but listening before leaving. The past is not only something we look at, it also asks how we choose to look. We leave the site, but not the responsibility of what we have learned. Back at the desk, even the quiet objects seem to ask for more humility. A compass can point a direction, but it cannot decide what a story means. The notebook does not close, because every honest ending leaves room for what remains unknown. Here at Lantern History, we follow the past, not to possess it, but to understand it with care. Now the journey can rest for tonight, though the story itself continues beyond this room. One last breath of the forest reminds us, history is never only behind us. It is also beneath, around, and ahead. The forest holds the last word softly. Not disappearance, but memory, change, and continuation. The people continue, in language, food, work, ceremony, family, and the quiet knowledge of place. Good research does not end by taking the past away. It ends by leaving with greater responsibility.
And so we return to the lantern, where the journey began, carrying the forest more carefully than before. Perhaps the better word is not lost, but hidden, remembered, changed, and still alive. Thank you for traveling quietly with Lantern History through forest, stone, water, memory, and time. As you leave this story, carry the question gently. Not where did they vanish, but how did they continue? The map remains open, because the past still has more to teach us when we return with care. For tonight, we lower the lantern, but we do not close the story. Good night from Lantern History. May the past stay gentle in your thoughts, and may the stories continue when the lantern is lit again.